This is the World Business and Financial Report with Jon Fondy, where we uncover, dissect, and inform with entertaining experts, great financial minds, and sometimes offbeat topics that might just give you another look into the unknown. And now, here's your host, Jon Fondy. Welcome to the World Business and Financial Report. I'm Jon Fondy. As we look around the globe, a day does not go by when we're barraged with news and information of financial challenges all around the globe. Coupled with natural disasters, changing economic conditions, and political and religious differences, we can quickly see that much of the same is happening right here in our own backyard. But what happens when it happens to you and your family? How do you stand up, fight back, and what tools are available to get you back on the right track? With me today is Roger Croteau. Roger is a well-trained and experienced problem solver who provides practical answers and solutions to individuals and companies facing serious personal, legal, and financial problems. He's represented a very broad-based clientele from publicly traded companies, small to medium-sized businesses, individuals, and estates. And he works through all kinds of problems with competency, compassion, and concern. And with me today is Roger Croteau. Roger, thanks so much for taking the time to be with us today.
John, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Okay, well, let's get down to business. We got viewers that are listening in, and I know they got some questions. Tell us a little bit about your background, how long you've been practicing law, and why you do it.
John, thanks. I mean, we have a law firm that's dedicated to people. We're dedicated to helping people get through difficult times, and these are those difficult times. I have a background in business, I have a background in finance, I have a background in tax law, and we dedicate all of that to bringing people through difficult times. And unfortunately, this is our time to call.
Well, yeah, you know, you mentioned it. We are in difficult times. It really has kind of hit home. But there are options to get people through these economic times. Let's talk a little bit about that today.
You know, John, there are three major options, but there are other options. I mean, the three bankruptcy options are Chapter 7, which is a complete liquidation and a start over, at Chapter 13. That's a workout situation for individuals, and there's a Chapter 11, and that's a workout for businesses. But there are other options, and we'll talk about those through the course of our show today, but most of the options we're going to talk about are things like debt negotiations and what a short sale means and the impact of a foreclosure. All of those things. You know, it's a myriad of various issues that all come to play at one time for people that they have to work through. And depending on which program works the best for them is which one we would recommend for people. But it requires a review.
You know, bankruptcy doesn't have the same stigma that it used to have now. Why is that?
Because so many people have filed. You know, John, everybody needs to hit the reset button anymore. In today's difficult economic times, I don't know of any way to get back on track other than to hit a reset button or hit the lottery.
And I think we know that the lottery is not something that's going to work out.
No.
Explain the different bankruptcies that people can get themselves some relief in.
Sure. What we hear commonly is a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. You know, that's the kind of bankruptcy where there are debt limitations as to whether or not you can whether or not you can qualify for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. For example, if you're a single person, you can't make more than $43,061. But there are caveats to all of that. But you have to qualify for that. You have to be able to see whether your debt limitations make that happen for you. If you do qualify for that, it's a bankruptcy, you're in, you're out, and you're basically completed in 90 days, and you're ready for a fresh start in your life.
And I think creditors look at that as a fresh start, and they're more than willing to talk with you.
Well, it hits the reset button, and I keep saying that, but it truly does. You know, if you're going to go borrow money from a lender, and you don't owe any more debt, and you're free and clear, and you can't refile another Chapter 7 bankruptcy for another 8 years, you're a good risk. And a lot of the people that are filing today, John, have good credit history. They have great credit history. They got involved in a bad situation. They had one of the classic problems, either a divorce or the loss of job or a decline. And clearly we all know that what's happened in our real estate market. So if you've had one of those kinds of situations, you really need to think whether or not it's a possibility for you. And you exercise that option, you go forward with that option, and you're going to rebuild your life a lot faster than you're going to try and wait till that drops off your credit bureau in 7 years.
Great. Other options, you mentioned Chapter 13.
Chapter 13 is when you're behind on payments on a home, when you're behind on car payments or things that you want to keep, and you don't meet the qualifications for a Chapter 7, you become a Chapter 13 candidate. Now, that, you know, hypothetically, if you're a single person, that's somebody that makes more than $40,600, and it's a person who wants to keep an asset, possibly. Okay? So we can then file you as a Chapter 13, which allows you to keep your home possibly if you choose to do that. Now, in a Chapter 13, we're given the option to get rid of junior liens on your property. Let's say that you had a second mortgage or a third mortgage even on your property, and you want to get rid of those. We can get rid of those in Chapter 13. You know, we hear all the time how people tell you that they can strip debt and reduce the amount you owe. Well, that's how it's done. It's done through reducing that lien and removing the lien from the property as an unsecured debt. So that's an option for people. But it's a payment plan, and some payment plans run from 3 years to 5 years, and it depends. And it's candidly not very onerous. I mean, it's something that's very doable for people, and it allows people to restart their lives one more time. Again, the problem with debt is your credit report will always be in bad shape if you do not remedy the problem. You either pay the debt, pay the account off, or you file a bankruptcy which effectively pays the account off. And if you do that, your credit report will start to improve. And everything in this lifestyle we live in is credit driven, and it's score driven. So if you look at your credit score, that's how you get approved for most credit. Until you fix that credit score, you really can't regain.
Hey, we got about 30 seconds left in this segment here. I know that sometimes business failures affect personal as well. We've got one more bankruptcy to talk about.
We do. It's kind of the Chapter 13 on steroids. It's called the Chapter 11, and it's generally considered a business bankruptcy. However, in light of the high dollar bankruptcies we have today, now the Chapter 13 has limitations as to liability. You can't have any more than $360,000 and odd cents of unsecured debt. So if you start looking at that number and you have had a lot of loans out there that got charged off or were related to property, you may not qualify. So people get pushed into what's called a Chapter 11. And when they get pushed into the Chapter 11, it has more requirements, but it really has some saving opportunities for our investors who own a lot of houses. I mean, there are possibilities in that Chapter 11 bankruptcy to reset the debt and reduce the principal in a lot of cases on rental property. So it's a great option used correctly.
Thanks, Roger. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to talk about some things that are going on in the home ownership realm. Roger's going to give us some advice on that, so we want you to stick around. We'll have a whole lot more when we come back right after these very short messages. Back to the World Business and Financial Report. I'm Jon Fondy, and our special guest today is Roger Courteau. Roger, thanks again for giving us that great information in the first segment. Now, as we move along here in Nevada, we've been hit with a triple whammy. We've got finances that are going on, we've got unemployment going on, and the housing market is really kind of strange right now. The one thing that our audience doesn't seem to understand, and I know that you can clear that up, is foreclosure versus short sale. How about some information on that?
Well, I mean, obviously, we've seen a lot of information that's come across the TV sets on call us for a short sale and we'll get you out of this problem. Really what that is, and we have to understand that in context between a foreclosure and a short sale. All right, assuming you haven't made your payments and your payments are late, well, you might be careening into a foreclosure, right? I mean, eventually you're not making the mortgage payments, the bank's calling you, they're trying to get paid, you're thinking about possibly trying to get a loan modification, but that's really not working out for most people these days. So you go down that road and you get to the end of that road and you can't figure out how you're going to get out of it. Well, here's an option. The option is short sale. A short sale is, by definition, selling the home for less than is owed on the property and having the lender's approval for doing so. That's all it is. It's a very simple prospect. It's a simple contract between you and the lender. But the problem arises that there's money left on the table. You still owe money. What do you do with it? How do you get rid of it? And what are the ramifications? What does it mean to you? Okay? And that's really the problem. So whoever you have for a short sale, whoever assists you in a short sale, needs to be a professional. And when I say a professional, I'm talking about someone that's doing this on an ongoing basis and understands how to negotiate with that lender. Okay? So taking it at its face value, you know, a couple of things we need to understand is that hypothetically, if you had a $100,000 first mortgage and a $50,000 second mortgage, and your house was only worth $80,000, all right, so we do the simple math. Well, if we sell it for $80,000 and you're only going to get fair market value, you're going to have $20,000 short on the first mortgage, and you're going to have $50,000 short on the second. Well, what's the incentive for anybody to give up anything? Well, that's the finesse of trying to negotiate this thing out. Now, what normally happens is when you attempt to do a short sale, the lender and the borrower negotiate. And when they negotiate, we'll say, look, this is all they have in the property. They're going to want to see some of your financial information. This is not a free lunch. I mean, you don't get to walk away just because. All right? You have to present evidence. You have to give a hardship. They have to know that you're truly in trouble and you're not paying, not because you don't want to, but because you can't. So we have to, get that process and communicate that to the lender. We have to educate the lender. We have to demonstrate that there's no money left in your coffers to come to the closing with cash. And that can be done. I mean, that's a process. It's an education process. It's gotten a lot easier over the last 2 years to get this accomplished. Now, when that's done, if it's done well, hopefully you get a release of a lien at the end, meaning they're not going to come after you for the deficiency. And the deficiency, again, is what you owe less what they sell it for, okay? Now, foreclosure, that's a different process, and it's more adversarial. It's, you and the bank are just not talking, you're not working together, you are going to let it go, and you just don't care. So the process works its way down the pike, so to speak. You haven't paid for quite a period of time. Mm-hmm. What you get in the mail is called a notice of default and intent to sell. When you get that document, it tells you have certain rights, but essentially at the end of 90 days, they're going to send you an intent to sell that property on the courthouse steps. We've all heard that term, courthouse steps, where the house is going to be sold. Well, that's when it happens. And at that point in time, it no longer is your home. Once it sells at the courthouse steps, it's no longer your home. You're an unwelcome tenant in that property. So we need to be cognizant of that. And candidly, doing a short sale allows you to be more of a participant in the process rather than a reactionary and getting thrown out. So there's definite improvement and definite importance in that issue.
Roger, just a couple of minutes left in this segment here. A lot of people try to do this on their own, and they say the banks aren't contacting me. Once a professional like yourself gets in touch with those banks, they tend to listen a little bit more, don't they?
Well, you know what it is, John? You're putting a package together that makes sense. Mm-hmm. All right, you're getting the credibility aspect of it. That hopefully, we've gone through the process so many times. We're presenting the evidence in an appropriate manner so they understand it. Mm-hmm. I mean, the bank needs to understand it. It's like when you applied for the loan, you had to give them certain information, right?
Right.
Well, when you want to get out of the loan, you got to give them the same information. They want to see that you're truly a distressed borrower, mm-hmm. and that we can truly try and work this through for the mutual benefit of all parties. Right, because the argument in a short sale is, lender, you're going to make more on the sale. Because if I force this into a distress sale, you're going to make less. Mm-hmm. All right, because on the courthouse steps, there generally is going to be a less sale price for that property as opposed to trying doing it in fair market value. So. And
they tend to listen to that a little bit more because also they don't want this problem either, do they? They want to stop this as much as the homeowner does as well.
The bank's not in the business of owning real estate. Yeah. They don't manage real estate really well at all. All right. They consider it a detriment to their book value, not necessarily an addition. Mm-hmm. They value paying loans. Defaulted loans cost the bank more difficulty to manage. They have to have higher reserves, and it takes them more human capital, if you will, to run this project. So it makes more sense to work with the borrower.
Okay, 1 minute left to go. Some suggestions on what that homeowner should do to make them feel better, if nothing else.
Don't not talk to the lender. It's a very simple process. If you want to upset somebody you're trying to do business with, don't talk to them. Your best thing you can do, right? I mean, this is common sense, right? The best thing you can do is keep them in the loop. Look, if you're honestly in trouble and you honestly can't make the payment, you need to recognize that fact to yourself. You need to understand it. You need to internalize it and face the truth. If you get to that point and you cannot proceed in ownership of that property, understand it's time to move on. And then try and do it gracefully. Mm-hmm. You want to try and get out as best you can so you can get back in. All right? Home ownership is everybody's goal. If you get out gracefully, what you're going to have is a paid-off account that's going to be paid at less than agreed. Mm-hmm. It's going to show late payments, but it's not going to be a foreclosure. And this is going to be far better for anybody who's going to be a future borrower to come back in the market.
That's great news and good stuff to hear. We've got more. We're only about halfway through the show right now. So we want you at home to kind of pull up your chair, take out a pen and some paper, take down some notes with this information that Roger's going to give you. We'll be right back right after these messages with more of the World Business and Financial Report. Stay with us, won't you? Report. My name is Jon Fondy. With us today is Roger Coteau. We've got two great segments. We're talking about some of the challenges that we have and some of the relief that's available for people out there. Folks, understand that there are answers to those questions. We're going to ask Roger to answer some of those. Recently, the legislature has thrown us a couple of bones to help us work through this a little bit. Talk about that, and we'll talk about some other debt as well.
Well, we were always a recourse state. Recourse means that if we took out a mortgage and we bought a house, that if for whatever reason we couldn't pay that house off, we were personally responsible. You know, whoever bought that house, whoever the borrower was, signed on the line, we had to pay the bill. So, you know, if the house dropped to half in value, you got to pay the bill. Well, as of October of 2009, first mortgages entered into after that date for primary occupied homes, and as long as it's not refinanced, are non-recourse in this state. First mortgages, okay? Big, big, big thing, all right, which means that if you went in, bought a house for whatever the number is, let's say it's $200,000, and it was one mortgage, first mortgage, taken out after October of 2009, and that property value dropped down to, pick a number, let's say $100,000, well, theoretically, if it's sold and that's all they got for it, that's all they could come after. They can't come after the individual borrower, and that's a very, very huge benefit.
Sure it is.
Right. It's not one we've had in the past. I mean, let's face it, we're working through a slug of loans that were entirely recourse and entirely actionable against the debtors. So the additional thing is, in June of 2011, they've now made second mortgages non-recourse. So if you get a second mortgage on your property, again, used for purchase money though, on owner-occupied, and it occurs after June of 2011, you know, new money, new loan, then that is non-recourse. And non-recourse is somewhat of a term of art. What it means is you're not personally responsible over and above the value of the home. That's what it means, all right? Because that's where everybody's having problems, right? You know, we talk and hear these terms of underwater. Well, underwater doesn't matter. It only matters because you're at fault and you're responsible for the deficiency. Right. So that's the problem. You know, if we remove the underwater portion, nobody would care.
That's true. You could breathe again.
Exactly.
Hey, in that particular situation, I think you said something that really stuck out in the last segment is one, don't not communicate with these people, or more, the better answer to that question is find somebody that knows how to communicate for you. And in this particular case, Roger, houses are not just the only thing that people have some deficiencies on. People are underwater or upside down on their credit cards as well. Any tips that you can talk about that?
You know, credit cards are a funny thing. You know, everybody gets concerned about the deficiencies on homes and property, but those aren't the people that I find to be the most aggressive. Oh, look, I've been doing debt work for years, okay? And the active parties that are the most aggressive in collections of debt are credit card companies and medical bill companies, all right? We'll talk about the IRS in a few minutes, but those two are primarily the parties that come after debt for years and years and years. They sell it off, okay, at declining, you know, value to various collectors, and those collectors keep putting you on the credit bureau. That damage your credit. They keep putting you into collection efforts, so you keep getting phone calls, and then eventually they'll sue you. Now, the thing you need to understand is that the statute of limitations on collections of a credit card debt is 6 years, at least in this state anyway, is 6 years from the last payment. So hypothetically speaking, you could have had a credit card with a $10,000 balance that you paid the minimum payment on every month for the last 30 years, and then you don't pay them at all for 6 years or 5.5 years, and then they could file suit. And that suit would be timely, and then they could sue you for the entire judgment. And in this particular state, the state we live in the state of Nevada, that can be renewed every 6 years until the day you die. So it is not a thing to be dealt with lightly. None of these credit collectors are, you know, against filing suit. If they thought they could collect the money, that's their job. And I understand that, and we all need to understand that. They're doing their job, and we're allowing them to do that. But
about a minute and a half here left in this segment. A lot of people have financial difficulties because they have medical bills. They don't have insurance, and they're stacking up medical bills. Talk about that for us.
Well, medical bills are a little bit different. You know, a lot of people will have a perfect credit history, and then have a huge medical event, whatever that might be. You know, but it all dovetails into all of our problems, right? I mean, when we start talking about the major reasons people file bankruptcy, well, it's a divorce, it's a loss of business, it's a loss of employment, it's a medical condition that causes you to be out of work. So unfortunately, it's rare to just get the medical bill problem. I mean, there's a special way to handle medical bills absent any other billing in your case. So that's a possibility, but it's rare that you don't have all the other problems that go with it, John. I mean, you know, it's unlikely. For example, you know, it's when people have financial problems and they have a business problem and they've owned a business and the business didn't go well, generally they usually have, you know, payroll problems, tax problems, all the things that we, you know, end up not paying become a problem later and haunt you into your new start and your new life.
All right, very good stuff. When we return, we're going to talk about the collector that everybody fears that keeps on collecting when the World Business and Financial Report returns. Our last segment here, Roger, we talked about the collector that keeps on collecting, and of course we're talking about the IRS. You can work around that as well too, can't you?
You know what, John? The good news is the IRS is not as bad or the big bad bear that they used to be. They've become far more friendly. They've become far more easy to work with, easy to deal with, okay? Just like everybody else, you know, they have the same problem collecting that everybody else has, okay? I think we have an epidemic of nobody has any money, right? That nobody's liquid, nobody can pay any bills. But the problem with the IRS is they're a priority debt, all right? Generally speaking, if you file a Chapter 13, you have to pay all of your tax liability off in the Chapter 13, which generally means in a lot of cases you can't file. I mean, you understand with that? You can't file. Because if you can't make enough money to pay them off within the 5-year period, we can't make that happen. We can't file the bankruptcy. You simply don't qualify. You fall into that land where you just don't have an option. Sometimes what makes more sense is if they qualify for a Chapter 7, maybe we file a Chapter 7, we clean away the remainder of that person's debt in the world, make them available, so whatever available cash they do have, we then can dedicate to the IRS and take care of those people and that payment outside of the bankruptcy court. You know, the IRS does many options, if you will, in trying to do debt negotiation. And that debt negotiation can be either an offer and compromise, but I'm going to tell you that if you're making good money and you're not impaired in some manner, or you're not, you know, well on and advanced in your years, the IRS thinks you can work and pay, okay? And they have, you know, a 10-year collection statute. If they reduce it to a lien and record that lien, then different rules apply. However, there are options, okay? In a bankruptcy, if you properly time that bankruptcy and you properly time when the tax was assessed and became due by the service, you have an opportunity, if it's non-priority versus priority debt, to pay that back or in fact discharge that debt, either in a Chapter 7 or a 13. So it is a case-by-case basis. It is very, very technical, if you will, to make sure that you comply with the various requirements. But done correctly with a practitioner that knows what they're doing, it is an effective tool. And again, let's face it, how many people out there can't get along with their lives because they're still walking around with a tax lien or a tax garnishment, and you know, people are living undercover because they can't work because of the garnishments. Look, there's no reason to live like that. The service really wants you to pay your taxes, and they want you to come clean. You know, they need taxes filed. I mean, in order to file a bankruptcy, your taxes have to be currently filed. Doesn't mean you don't owe. I mean, you can owe all the tax money you need to owe, but they must be filed, okay?
Well, great. We've got a short remaining time. We've covered a lot. For those of you that just tuned into our show, we're going to have Roger go back and recap some of the things we talked about before. Roger, maybe you could go ahead and start with going through the different forms of bankruptcies and move into foreclosures as well.
You know, again, we talked about 7, 13, and 11. You know, these are acronyms we use, you know, the numbers, and we define them as in our minds as what they are. But a Chapter 7 is basically resetting the button. You file the bankruptcy. The day after, once you get a discharge, you do not owe those debts that have been discharged. You truly get a fresh start. You can start building credit the day after you get your discharge in bankruptcy and move on with your life. Truly a wonderful thing if you're in that position. And I'm going to caution people, and I'm going to tell you Don't file bankruptcy when you start doing well. You do it before you start doing well. I mean, it just makes more sense. I mean, don't wait till, well, geez, I'm going to get on my feet, then I'll go file. It makes no sense. I mean, you need to file when you're in your worst condition. And that's for your benefit, not for anyone else's. So, you know, plan ahead, be thoughtful. If you've got an opportunity to, you know, maybe see a way out of your mess, you need to evaluate what you're going to do. You know, most people have such a drag on their credit bureau, you know, you have to look at how much money do you owe and how much money do you make. And if those two don't make any sense, and the quotient between those two don't make any sense, it's time to hit the reset button. Give yourself a fresh start.
Short sale foreclosure.
Sure. Short sale and foreclosure, you know, we've got new laws on the books, but candidly it's not going to help many people. The new laws just came into effect. The only thing it will do is, under the new law, if it goes through a foreclosure, or under the old law, I should say, under the old law, if they went through a foreclosure, they had to file suit within 6 months on a first mortgage to get a deficiency, okay? To get a judgment on deficiency. Well, that's been extended now to junior liens, you know, second, thirds, that kind of thing. And it's been done for also a 6-month period. So they've tightened it up and they've said, okay, instead of letting that second lien sit out there for 6 years before you have to file suit on it, if the foreclosure happened after July of 2011, then that's the process. So they have to file suit more in a timely manner so that you can't sit back, so to speak, lay in wait, hope that you start improving, and then sue you for the money.
Communicating, that's the big thing that Roger's telling us here. In closing here, credit cards and medical bills.
Be smart. They don't go away. Everybody seems to think they don't go away. You know, I always get this statement that a client will come in and they'll say, well, I don't have any credit card debt. You know, I've got the credit cards that I had a long time ago, and, you know, I looked at my bureau, my credit bureau, and they said they're charged off, so I don't need to worry about that. No. All that means is the bank sent it along to a collector. That collector will come eventually. It always does. Now, you may get a judgment against you if they don't know your last known address. They could have filed suit in court, got a judgment against you, and that judgment could be sitting out there for years and years and years before you even know it exists. So, I mean, these are all concerns. Pull your credit bureau regularly. You need to know what's going on in your credit history. We live on a numbered society. Too many people today are having too many financial problems. And if we're ever going to come out of this recovery, we need to reset the button for all of our values on housing. I mean, that's the only way this works. And we need to reset the debt that we owe. Now, if the debt and the income ratio all make sense, there's a future for everybody to move forward. Build equity again, restart, rebuild, restart our savings accounts. That's the only way that the economy is going to get solvent again, and we're going to be able to operate as a society. So until that happens, I think we all have some problems.
Well, great. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you very much, John.
Well, that does it for this week. Stay safe and stay informed. I'm Jon Fondy with my guest, Roger Croteau, and we'll see you next time on the World Business and Financial Report.